We're talking today with Harvey Davelaar of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, now, Harvey, start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Wyoming Township, Michigan, which was adjacent to Grand Rapids, Michigan, December 23, 1923, and lived in the Grand Rapids area all of my life.
Okay.
And
what did your family do for a living when you were a kid?
my dad was a paper hanger and a painter, and he was self-employed.
Mm-hmm. And so what was life like for your family during the Depression then?
Well, I actually had it quite well good, my sister and I. My dad worked for the government for the, what do you call it? It slips my mind. Anyway, work progress.
Yeah, WPA, yeah.
WPA. And he was fortunate in the fact that in the Godfrey Lee school system, where we lived, had gotten a grant to repaint their schools, but the school board had to furnish the superintendent for the job, and he was the only contractor in the district, and so they came to him and asked him if he would run it, which he did, and he did it through several years, and so actually he was employed just about all the way through the Depression.
Okay.
So we were, I might say, quite well off financially.
Yeah, because I guess when we think of WPA work, it's usually what the ordinary guys working in that would be doing, and they wouldn't make very much money.
No.
No, but he was management, essentially.
He was management.
Okay.
And he did not work for WPA, he worked for the school board.
Right.
So I don't know what amount of money or anything, but relatively to everybody else, we were living pretty good.
Yeah, all right. Now, did you finish high school?
I finished high school at Godfrey Lee High School.
And what year did you graduate?
I graduated in June 1941 with a class of 83, which was the largest class ever graduated to that school at that time.
Okay. Now, after you graduated from high school, what did you do?
I, at that time, of course, there was preparation for war, so one of the local automobile plants had been converted into making dive bomber wings for the British and Dutch navies. And of course they were hiring everybody they could get. So we were training, a few of us, for about 1 month as riveters and sheet metal workers. And so I went to work there, and I worked there until I was called up to the Navy.
All right. And so now do you remember how you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Oh yes, it was my family's tradition. On Sunday we would go to church in the morning and Sunday school afterward, and then come home, and then we would have the big dinner of the week. And after that, my parents always took a nap. And but we had a radio, which was not too common, and they allowed me to listen to the radio Sunday afternoon, which if you were in a strict Dutch neighbor family, that was kind of unusual. So I was sitting there listening to the radio when they broke in and announced that Pearl Harbor had been bombed, and of course, like everybody else, I didn't know where Pearl Harbor was or where it was, but as afternoon went on and more bulletins came through, we started to figure it out. So.
Okay. Now, before that happened, had you paid much attention to the news of the world, or the war in Europe, that kind of thing?
No, I was a typical high school kid.
All right. Okay. Now, the work that you had, was there a deferment available for that?
No.
Or?
They tried to get us deferred, but was not allowed.
Okay. All right.
I must say that they kept us as long as they could. They stalled off. But I did not want to get in the Army. Some of the fellows that I knew had been drafted and had gone through basic training and came home for a short time afterward, and they said, "Oh, you don't want to be in the Army and call on the mud." And I said, "Well, no, I don't want that. And besides, I'm partial to the Navy anyway. I always have been." And so I talked to my folks, and I said, I would like to enlist in the Navy. Of course, I had to have their permission. I was only 17 years old then.
No, you would have been, if you're born in 20.
Yeah, 1923,
Okay.
and this was in the summer of 1941.
Well,
42.
42 though,
Yeah.
you're going to be 18. You're 18 then.
Yeah.
But anyway, but you still wanted their support regardless. But did they actually have to sign papers for you?
Oh yeah. They
Okay.
had to, so anyway, I went to another fellow classmate, and I went to the Navy recruiters and enlisted,
Okay.
and with the permission of our parents, of course.
Right.
So.
Okay. So then, where do you go for your boot camp?
Well, that was strange because so many of us didn't want to do the Army. We overwhelmed the Navy recruitment program, so we would go to Detroit and get a physical. And when we passed our physical, we'd be assigned a date in the future when we would actually be called up. And that happened. We enrolled as either July or August of that summer.
Okay.
And it was not until the weekend after Thanksgiving that I was actually called up and went to Detroit for a physical.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, we went to Great Lakes for basic training,
Okay.
you might
So-
say.
So where is Great Lakes?
Great Lakes is north of Chicago, between Chicago and Milwaukee.
All right. Yeah, very far northern end of Illinois, there along
Yeah,
the lake.
right.
Okay. What did the training there consist of?
Well, I guess the basic stuff, you learn what the Navy is all about, and the rudiments, knots, and so on, how to take orders and obey them. And I remember it was a bitter cold winter, and we would march from class to class and so on. Of course, we took physical fitness and all that sort of thing, but I guess that's mostly it.
Okay.
We slept in hammocks. We were still in the old barracks and had to get used to that, not roll out during the night. But it went quite well. I kind of rather enjoyed it. I thought discipline and so on kind of fit me. So
Okay. Well, if you had a fairly strict family, your background anyway,
yeah,
following orders was normal.
yeah, more
Okay.
or less.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Now, were there some other people who were training with you who were having trouble?
Oh, yeah, there was a whole company. I forget, I think it's a little over 100 men
Mhm.
in each class, what we were called. And we did all the paperwork, we were interviewed and so on. And so that was forget how many weeks, either 12 or 15 weeks of training. And during that interview process, they of course knew that I had worked with aviation metal work.
Mm-hmm.
So when they assigned us where we were going to go, I was assigned to a Navy Aviation Metalsmith School, which took place in Navy Pier in Chicago. Navy Pier in Chicago at that time was completely made over into a school.
Mm-hmm.
With barracks and the whole thing were on the pier, and that's where everybody, at least from our Great Lakes area, went for aviation training, radio smith, engine, hydraulics, whatever you were qualified for, you were trained there.
Mm-hmm.
And then that lasted until about June
Okay.
of 43.
All right. Now, while you're there, particularly while you're at Navy Pier, would you be able to get liberty? I mean, could you go into Chicago? And,
Oh yes, every weekend we were, from Saturday noon until midnight Sunday, we were given freedom. So, and Chicago was a wonderful place to go to. because a service person could not pay for anything. Everything was free, all sports, movies, entertainment. All you had to do was go to the USO and ask for a ticket, and you would get one, and that was it. So, and of course the museums and the other things that are there. So it was a wonderful place to be, to go to school. So.
All right. Now, what specifically did your training consist of? What were you physically learning to do?
Well, number one was to read blueprints, and number two was we made different things that we taught us how to bend the metal, how to mark it out, and then how to rivet it together. And we also learned how to weld steel parts, and that was pretty much it.
Okay. Did you work mostly with steel, or did you have aluminum?
All aluminum. The only steel I remember was in the classroom when we had to learn the art of welding, which we never used again, but anyway, it was part of the basic training, of course.
All right. So now, once you complete that training program, what do they do with you?
Well, then the section on the pier was called Outgoing Unit, OG, and we stayed there until we were assigned to a place, which for me was Naval Air Station in Quonset Point, Rhode Island. And when we arrived there, 6 of us from our class were assigned there. And the Navy transferred you that way individually. Or in our case, it was 6 of us together, and we were responsible to get ourselves there by X date and time, and so we did that successfully.
Okay. Did you go by train, or?
Went by train from Chicago to Boston, Boston to Providence, where the Navy had a bus waiting for us, and took us down to Naval Air Station in Quonset Point. Was down Narragansett Bay, close to the ocean.
Yep. All right. And then, what was your job once you got there?
Well, I was assigned to what was called the Assembly and Repair Hangar, where did just what the title said. They assembled aircraft that were shipped there and repaired those that were damaged. And so that was mostly what we did. But then I wound up with a group that was brand new, was installing rocket launchers underneath the wings of fighter planes and torpedo bombers. And that became my number one task while I was there.
All right. Now, was there a larger command that you were part of? Naval Air Transport, something like that?
No,
or was that later?
That comes later.
Okay. So here you were just at the Naval Air Station. So now, was Quonset Point, was that a place that was used as a base for anti-submarine patrol? Or?
That was a permanent Naval Air Station. All permanent structures as opposed to temporary. Yeah, what we did, that was the purpose of the rockets underneath the planes. That was anti-submarine patrol, and they had large seaplanes and all the other stuff that goes with it. But our planes would be on what we called mini aircraft carriers, small ships that were converted into aircraft carriers, which did convoy duty through the Atlantic, of course.
Right.
But the object of the rockets was a group of planes would go out, and one of them was equipped with a searchlight, a huge thing for our day that took the place of the bomb bay, and they tried to catch a German submarine that had surfaced to recharge their batteries, and once they saw one or found one, then the other planes equipped with a rocket would attack it and hopefully do some damage and force it to go home or sink it maybe. Though I think that was an outside chance, but they would damage it anyway.
Okay. So how long were you at Quonset Point?
I was there about a year.
Okay. And during that time, I mean, did you mostly just know the other mechanics, or did you get
Yeah.
to talk to the pilots or air crew? Or?
No, we had nothing to do with the air crew or
Mm-hmm.
any of the actual flying.
Okay.
We were just like working in a big factory.
And did you ever hear anything about what happened out there on the ocean, either with convoys or submarines? Or
No more than civilians did.
okay,
So,
so you're just in your own world. All right. Now, did you spend most of your time just on the base, or would you go into the smaller
I
towns or
did there
province?
because as a permanent base, it had everything.
Mm-hmm.
It had what we called ship service, was just like a store.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a restaurant that you could go to if you didn't like the Navy furnished
Mm-hmm.
meals. But no, in a sense, we were isolated.
Mm-hmm.
But in the weekends, there would be buses going into Providence, but I was content just to stay on the base.
All right. Now, were you communicating with people back home very often, or?
By letter.
Okay.
That's the only way. When I tried to call home on long distance telephone, we'd have to sign up. And so usually what I did, both on the Atlantic and the Pacific coast, you would go to the AT&T place and you would sign up for a certain time, and they would more or less guarantee that your car would go through at that time. And that's the only direct communication I had with my parents.
Mhm.
So,
All right. Now, were you disappointed or relieved that you weren't being sent overseas?
no, I was very happy because as a boy, I was a kind of an airplane nut. I used to make models and fly them and so on. So I was in an area where I kind of a dreamland. It's something that I really like to do, work on actual airplanes that were actually contributing to the war. So.
Right. So that worked for you. Did you ever get a chance to go up in any of the aircraft?
No,
So we're not giving out seaplane rides or anything.
no, they weren't giving any. The one thing which really was on the West Coast, but if you had a furlough home for any length of time, there was the ability to go to a certain office on the air station and ask if there were transport flights going in your direction, and that's all by chance as I understood it.
Mm-hmm.
They'd say, yes, there is one going to Chicago, or there is one going to Kansas City or St. Louis. We can fly you that far, and then you had to wait and say, well, something close to Grand Rapids, Chicago, Detroit or something, that I might get home from there. But that whole process could take a day or two sometimes to get to where you wanted to go. So I never tried it.
All right. Now, while you were out there in Rhode Island, were you following the course of the news of the war very carefully, or were you just doing your job?
No, just doing my job.
Okay. So how is it then that you wound up in California?
Well, as the submarine warfare was coming to an end, pretty well had the Atlantic to ourselves, they started shipping everybody, not to the West Coast, of course, and eventually it's going to be the preparation to fight in the Pacific and end the war there.
Mm-hmm.
So we once again went to the OGU, the outgoing unit in barracks, and there we waited to be transferred wherever. We didn't know where. We had sealed orders, but there was chief petty officer that was in charge of us, and he had the orders, and he was not to tell us, of course. So we were in the outgoing unit, and I can remember very vividly, and one morning we woke up after a couple of weeks there, and there was a string of passenger cars in the siding, and he said, yep, you're shipping out, you're on this train. So we took that train all the way to Oakland, California.
Okay. How long did that take?
About 4 days.
All right.
So,
Did you have to stop much and let other trains go by, or?
supposedly we had priority, and but no, once in a while from Chicago on to Oakland, the only time we would pull off was when a streamliner, one of the fast passenger trains, was coming the other way, and we would put on a siding until it went past, and then we would go again.
Right. And how do they feed you while you were on the train?
Oh, very good. We were in the dining car. Each one of our passenger cars would assign a time, and you would go in and they would feed you.
Okay.
So we ate pretty good.
All right.
Not luxuriously, but we had hot meals. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. All right. And now once you get to Oakland, then what happens?
Got to Oakland, and there again you're in the outgoing unit, and sat there for about 2 weeks and wondering where we were going to go, and I was hoping to get on an aircraft carrier. That was my dream, but I didn't. And when my name was called and I was given a time to meet and so on, put on a bus, and had no idea where I was going, of course, and we wound up on Treasure Island in San Francisco Bay, and said, here's where you're going to be stationed. Well, Treasure Island in those days was a great big outgoing unit where people getting off ships were kept for a while, or people going onto the ship would get their assignments. But on that island was a huge aircraft repair facilities for Pan American Airways. They repaired their seaplanes, which were flying the Pacific at that time as passenger planes. So the Navy took it over and made an overhaul base out of it, and so we were assigned there. And once again, we had very nice duty. We were kind of an independent unit from everything else going on Treasure Island, though we ate at their dining halls and we went to their movies and everything. We had all the privileges of the island, but we were more or less, otherwise we were pretty well restricted to our little area.
All right. And now what kinds of aircraft did you work on there?
We had a PBY-2, which was a 4-engine seaplane that was designed and put into service in 1937, and it was already obsolete, but it was a huge aircraft. I got pictures of it then. So they decided that Navy was still trying to get supplies out the Pacific every which way they could. So they took these aircraft and took all the armaments off of it, sealed up the bomb bays, and put flat decks inside of them and used them for cargo carriers. That's how they got the Naval Air Transport Service designation. And so my responsibility as a metalsmith was to keep the metal parts of the aircraft repaired and functional, and sometimes to put different brackets and so on when they modernized the radio equipment or navigating equipment and so on. So anything to do with metal, we were responsible for.
Okay. Now, would these planes just get wear and tear from extensive use, or?
Well, yeah. The big problem with them was they were strictly a seaplane. They had no wheels or no, like some others that had both wheels and flotation. These were strictly seaplanes, and so they landed and took off in water. Well, our biggest amount of work was they would hit debris in the water and damage the hull and spring leaks and so forth, and that's why we were called an overhaul base. When they got damaged too much, they would be brought over to us and brought up on land, and then we would recondition them. And did just exactly what the word overhaul means. They put new engines on and new radio equipment, or bring them right up to date, you might say.
All right. Now, did you have much communication at all with the other naval personnel, or you
No,
sat at your own table and?
no. We, like I say, we were an isolated group in the old Pan American facilities there.
Right. Okay. Now, did you go into the city of San Francisco?
Oh, yes. City of Oakland and San Francisco were the places to go over the weekend. And our setup was that you could do that 2 times a month. 1 time a month they would get what was called a short leave to go into town, or you could go in Saturday and stay overnight Sunday, and as long as you were back and ready to work on Monday morning at 7 o'clock, you had that privilege. And then what we call once a month was a long one, when you would go out and have both Friday and Saturday nights to go in San Francisco. And like Chicago, it was the most wonderful place because everything was free. But in San Francisco, as I remember it, they had a multi-story building, the USO, that is, United Service Organization. And the upper floors were had cots where you could sleep overnight. So that was the reason that we would like an overnight stay, just to get off the base for a while. So.
And did the USO provide entertainment either on the base or in the town, or did you just get tickets to go to things?
No.
Or?
No, I don't remember going to anything specifically USO.
Okay.
Only at the same thing as in Chicago. I remember seeing my first hockey game. I saw a football game at the University of California in Berkeley, and the SEALs hockey team, and I didn't know they had a baseball team at that time, and maybe they didn't during the war.
Not major league there yet.
No,
The Giants were still in New York.
No, that was way off in the future yet. So, but.
Okay. Now, were there, during the time you were in, whether in Rhode Island or in California, were there particular news events or developments in the war that did get your attention? Do you remember when Roosevelt died, for instance?
Yeah, I remember Roosevelt died. We kind of, by that time, we were older and more curious about the war in Europe. And we knew that the war was ending down, and by just the activities on that base with transfer of people, that we knew the Pacific was being built up. We kind of figured that out ourselves, but we weren't told that it was happening. But.
Okay. And do you remember hearing about the atomic bomb?
Yeah, that. I remember hearing about that. That's when I was waiting to be discharged out there. That's when that occurred.
Okay, so in August of '45.
I'm sorry?
August of '45 is
Yeah.
when. So.
Yeah.
Okay, because I thought you weren't discharged until '46.
I was. That's true.
Okay.
The discharge system was based on points. Maybe you've heard of that.
Yeah.
And it was based on how many days you were in combat and all that sort of thing. Well, having been stationed in the United States all my career, I was real low on points. So I was one of the last ones to be discharged.
But when they dropped the bomb, you were already starting to count your points.
Yeah.
You were waiting for your chance.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when they announced the bomb, did you have any idea what that meant, really?
No.
Okay.
No. We just knew that it was something very powerful and it caused the war to end.
Because the Japanese surrender comes not very long
Yeah.
after that.
Yeah, August 14th or 15th.
Yeah.
There, so.
All right. Now, once that happens, does life on the base change at all once the war's over?
Well, yeah, because then the next thing was the highest point people were being sent home. So in every unit you were losing people. And like in our case, that we had people that had served on carriers and so and were transferred land-based to us, and so they went first, and it progressed as your numbers came up, you would be sent home. So, but also on the atomic bomb, you mentioned that they were recruiting people who would be willing to sign on for, I forget, a period of 6 or 8 months, extend their, even though they were eligible for discharge, but if they wanted to extend it and work on the setup for the tests that were coming up, you could sign up for that for a certain period, 6, 8 months or a year. I tried to sign up for that, but there again, Aviation Metalsmith didn't have anything to do with that kind of activity, and so didn't get it. But
okay. Now, did they make any effort to encourage you to re-enlist, or were they mostly just getting rid of people?
mostly getting rid of people, in my case anyway. I remember the officer that was in charge of our group that you went through a series of classes and so, and one of his first remarks was, he says, I feel like I'm talking in vain because I'm sure none of you want to re-enlist, but if you do, this is your option and what will happen, and such as you'll be automatically promoted one rank, and you of course would get more pay and so on, and more leave time to go home and that sort of thing, but no one did.
Okay. Now, during the time when you were in, did you ever get a leave to go home?
I did, because I accumulated leaves. I was never able to get a leave because of the activity and the necessity of it. We didn't get leaves. But in August, then they started opening it up. And then that too was based on how long since you had been home. And of course I hadn't been home since I left it. So I applied and I was given 1 month leave. So at that time you had to go down to the station, railroad station, and you signed up for a train to take you home, and on a given date and time and so on. So I went home for 30 days. I took my whole 30 days and went home in August. And that's some of what I don't know what really happened on the base in August, in the month of it. It happened to fit the calendar of August. So.
Okay. And then, but then you have to go back to the base.
Oh yeah.
All right. And then when did they finally discharge you?
Well, that was a little different process too, because these planes that we were serving were so obsolete and probably so beat up that they immediately disbanded our squadron. And so I was transferred to Moffett Field, which is south of San Francisco, between San Francisco and San Jose, which was a big, primarily as a testing air station for new aircraft and techniques and different things. And they had a Naval Air Transport Squadron, but theirs were all land-based planes, 4-engine, which would have been passenger planes, were seats taken out and flat decks put in and they used to transport, or they were kept as transport planes with seats, but anyway, we maintained those. And then I was picked to be sent to gas tank school because those planes didn't suffer very much damage as far as the metal was concerned. So I was trained how to repair the gas tanks, which were all inside the wings. And that's how I finished out my career in the Navy.
Okay. And so when do you get out?
I got out March 2nd of 46.
All right. And after you got out, what did you do?
Well, first thing I did is decided to just loaf around. Well, a little different. I had an aunt and uncle that lived in San Diego, and it was March, of course, and I thought I didn't want to go back to Michigan in bad weather, and so I wrote my aunt and uncle, knowing the time when I was going to be discharged, if I could stay with them for 2 weeks. But they said, sure, come on down. I had 2 cousins there that were home, and so I did that, and then I came home and had to make a decision. My training in the Navy qualified me to become a metal, what do you call it, apprentice, that's it. And, or not. And so it seemed my dad is starting back in his one-man business. I took the easy way, really, to be honest, and said, okay, let's work together. So I did. And from there on, of course, construction and everything started booming after World War II. So I met my sweetheart-to-be in April of that year, and eventually we married in '48. So in 1950, my dad and I decided to form a partnership and create our own business, which we did. And we did that until my dad retired. And then after that, I had it by myself.
All right. And was this all kinds of construction, or still the painting
This
and
was all
papering?
painting, painting and paper hanging. And we did. My dad worked strictly residential when he was alone, and we expanded into commercial construction. And we did schools, and we did churches, and we did new home construction, which, like I said, it was just booming. There was, if you had the manpower and the time and could do it, we were hired. I don't ever remember bidding on a job. Everything was a call, and you have time, can you do such and such in the future, and, or will you save time? And so it was really a great time to be in business.
All right. Now, when you think back to the time that you spent in the Navy, what do you think you learned from that or took out of it?
Well, I think number one was discipline, of course, how to discipline yourself, how to take care of yourself physically, because otherwise you depended on your parents. But how to budget time and do a good job, knowing that one way or another you're judged by what quality of the work that you do. So I think those are the biggest things that I took out. A lot of quote unquote good habits, which stayed with me the rest of my life. So.
Okay. And then just to think back to your time in the Navy, are there other things that stand out in your memory about that you haven't brought into the story yet?
You mean unusual things?
Yeah.
Well, back to the Quonset point, the unusual things was putting these rocket brackets on and knowing that that was something brand new, and so that kind of gave me a thrill, you might say, that I was on the forefront of something happening. And
Do you know what kind of aircraft you were putting them on?
I was putting them on what we call the F-4F fighter plane,
Okay.
and a TBM, which was a torpedo bomber. And the F-4F actually was a fighter that was the Navy entered the war with, but was soon obsolete. But it was small and could land on small carriers, and what we call, should say, a jeep carrier.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were, of course, they could build the carriers quickly, and they were equipped with, and the TBM could land on a small area. So they were the ones that were sent out on convoy. You didn't see these big aircraft carriers like the Enterprise and some others that were actually fighting aircraft.
Right, but these were escort carriers, and they
Yeah,
could provide air protection for a convoy in the middle of the Atlantic.
Yeah.
Oh, so they had a job to do.
Number one, of course, was go after the submarines,
Okay.
German submarines.
All right. Well, you've got kind of an unusual career, so I'd just like to thank you for taking the time to share the story today.
Oh, you're welcome.
Go.